I've been thinking a lot about just the concept of like compulsion, like something is good, something is nice, something is pleasant, something is
Loss of self
appealing in
through the
some
body and the emotions, yes?
yeah, yeah. And I'm curious about that because it seems like
Something that's a reverence issue.
it's a
The
reverence issue. The
reverence
reverence
curriculum.
curriculum.
It's interesting, we're born as bodies and emotions and not much cognitive facility. People don't realize that there's even something called mind of other. There's a whole progression of our self-awareness. You ask a young child, and it's somewhat of an interesting scenario. There's a number of ways of presenting it, but it sort of works out to, if you're the young child and I say, okay, we take your toy and we put it in the drawer in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. I'm being more complex. I'm saying it in an adult way. Now you go outside to play, and I take your toy and put it in your room. When you come in, where will you think your toy is?
In the drawer in the kitchen.
That's an adult answer.
Okay.
The child will answer some, of course it won't be as complicated as a scenario. They do various ways of doing this. Will believe when you come in that you'll know it's in the room. Because your mind is my mind. When you go outside, it isn't possible that you don't know what's going on in here. You think you will. Mm-hmm. When you start to understand, it starts with object permanence. A little child, they see an object, you cover it up with a blanket, object gone. Mm-hmm. They don't see it, it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. And then there starts to be more and more object permanence. Then you develop mind of other, all of these sort of things. All of these things are developed. You're not born with them. Mm-hmm. Those things, if you don't have them, I certainly don't think you can love in the same way.
Right. But
there's also a lot of aspects to the human dynamic that get trapped along the way. Freud, some people say, oh, Freud was terrible, blah, blah, blah. Freud was wonderful in what he did. He was a scientist. He, I believe, was a physiologist even, wanted to take this soft pseudoscience of psychology and make it into something much more rigorous, make it scientific. And he had all these stages of development. And we all now do these stages of development, stages of the development of mind of others, stages of psychosexual development, stages of moral decision making, all of these things. And we tie them to ages. And what we realize is that people often develop to a certain point and they don't develop any further. Why? There's no need. That if someone, for example, develops to a point where they discover the satiation. Mm-hmm. And then they're in a family where it's all about satiation. Mm-hmm. If you do this, you get the goodie. If you do that, and it's all about satiation. They have no need to develop beyond satiation. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, they perfect satiation. Mm-hmm. So you have these people in these different stages of what you would call moral development. Mm-hmm. And they're tied to their body and tied to their emotions in different ways. And their mind of other or their sense of self is still immersed in those things and confused with those things. So they think that their self is their performance. And if their performance is bad, their self feels somehow less and their whole experience of life dims. Yeah. So to be able to experience self beyond the body, self beyond the emotions, to be able to wake up with a stomach ache and not be upset or angry, to be able to experience incredible adversity, yet also feel intense love. These things are practices that are done in reverence. And what I hope, and what I've heard from some people in reverence, is they start to experience a sense of self, a different sense of self for the first time, often. Because they never had the opportunity. Yeah. They never had the need. As a matter of fact, it was disenforced by their environment.
Yeah, I remember different periods of time. I think the first time I ever experienced something like that, I had gone through a period of strict discipline. And then I was doing some emotional trainings that you had created. I think it was the characterization series. And I got out of the workshop and I was in the car and I felt like I was driving a different car. Like my experience of the whole space around me was different. And I looked at myself in the mirror and I felt like I was looking at a different face. And I saw like a freckle on my cheek that I had never noticed before. And I was like, what happened? Like it was this sort of objective perspective, I guess, of myself in my life that I had never had before. And I know the rigorous training I needed to go through in order to get myself to that point. So when you say it's a practice and it's a study and things like that, it makes sense because it also wanes. Like when I stop the practice, I know it's there, so it doesn't go away completely, but it's not how I experience the world all the time. So I think, yeah, I don't know.
Well,
Sharing.
Well, it's an interesting thing. You wonder with human dynamic, is what you might call a state of awareness superior to another state of awareness? And we define a superior state of awareness where the person that has the superior state of awareness can do everything that someone without that superior state of awareness can do, and they can do more. So one of our objectives is to give people more options. It's never to close down their options of perception, their options of behavior. It's to open more avenues, but also to give them the tools to choose amongst those avenues. So, what my hope would be, some people say, oh, that sounds very terrible. What, she went through some sort of training. Was it a drug experience?
Yeah, no, it wasn't like,
or whatever. It has nothing to do with that. It's actually, it's very, very hard to describe.
Yeah.
But the hope is that you have more. You see things you've never seen before.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I mean, that was exactly my experience, and it took me by surprise. But it's interesting because the rubber band snap is so fast. Do you know? It's like we forget how wonderful it is, and then we snap back to what it was before, which is subpar. But somehow...
But if you practice it, you come to a point, and we talk about that, we have all these, what we call Pavlovian links to your behavior. So you have your base state, and at times you get really, really happy, but you have all of these elastic bands that pull you back to being the way you were. Right. So a lot of people experience this. They'll have their normal life, then they'll get really, really happy, but then suddenly after a while they find themselves back again exactly as they were. And sometimes, when people are really happy one way or raise their base state, there is less jealousy, less anger, less hate, and certain things that you can even measure, see in their language. Are they vengeful? Do they need to talk negatively about people? All sorts of things like that. And they get to this state where they just feel so good, and suddenly they feel a sense of well-being for many people. People they've had arguments for a long time, they come to understand them. They could even do productive things with them. And then a month later, they fall back. Because we have these Pavlovian links that bring us back down. But what happens is the more we practice, the more, as we're in that higher base state, the more we form links there.
Right.
And it comes to a point where you practice enough that those links supplant the links that pulled it down. And now that becomes your standard. And if you go back to your old standard, it'll feel like you're sinking and you'll get pulled back up. So really, to increase your base state, it's not just increasing it once, there it is, now we have it. Right. It is really fostering it and fostering your new life around it to bring that as a standard. So if you increase your joy, if you increase your kindness, if you increase your compassion, which are all measures of base state, you want that to stay. And you want that to become natural in your life. At first you do practices, you think, okay, I'm going to try to be kind. I'm going to try to extend myself to strangers and just for the sake of experiencing that. And after a while you find you smile at people more. You'll treat people more kindly. You'll do acts of kindness or community support that seem to be a natural extension of how you are, because now they are.
Right. Right. It's a training.
Yes. So you practice this.
Right. So I wrote, what's the nature of spiritual enlightenment? Can you explain it to me?
That's a very interesting thing. To explain anything like that is to do it disservice. I think that each person has, depending on what your beliefs are, even about the term enlightenment, different people have different journeys, and there's no enlightenment score. There's no measure. There's no, this person's more enlightened than that person. And it's more that people find their way to their personal completion, find their way to a higher base state, find their way to be able to embrace all of humanity, all of living things as them, and see those things within them without fear. So you might say that as you do these practices, you overcome fears, you remove bonds of suffering and replace them with joy. You come to have a relationship with human pain so that you have a deep conscience. Because when we have a conscience over something, it is marked by pain. And that pain is good. It is good to pain over either maladies, injustices, or tragedies. And that understanding, that experience, brings the joys of the world and what you might call the brilliance of the world and the magnificence of the world, makes it so much more light. It's like that old sort of trite saying, God created darkness so we could better see the light. But existence isn't all about light and darkness. It's about something that encompasses both. People somehow think, unfortunately, in certain types of philosophies, that I want to be enlightened because I want to just not have to do anything. I want to be in harmony with the universe.
Right.
Sort of the lazy man's view of enlightenment. If you look of people who are the most enlightened that we've had, whether you consider Jesus that, or Buddha that, or any of the other, Gandhi, whatever, and they may not be in the same class to some people, other people they may be in the same class, none of them are slackers. None of them just sit and are in harmony. None of them have easy lives. Most of them have lives that make our lives, no matter how difficult they are, look pleasant and comfortable. Well, the truth of the matter is, when pain is no longer tied with suffering, and when we're no longer worried about having easy road, being harmonious, or things like that, when we cut ties to all of those judgments, which are what you might call part of our fearful ego, when those things go away, yeah, we do have more pain in our life, but no suffering. We do have more depth in meaning and tragedy in our lives because we're willing to embrace life in its fullness and accept tragedies as well as good things. People take the happy path. This is what I call it. In other words, they're looking to just make life happier and happier and have goodies, goodies, goodies. And that's an imbalance. And if you study sometimes the ancient scriptures and all different things that have been written by religious people, there's so much wisdom in them. And in one ancient scripture, there's it's a story, and I apologize for not having it so literal, but essentially a man who's undergone many, many practices, who becomes enlightened, so to speak. But he can't cross the final threshold to his final enlightenment because all he had accumulated what you would call good, sort of like good rewards. And all his life he had wanted a golden castle. And he had accumulated enough good actions to have that golden castle. So his positive balance sort of keeps him from enlightenment. So they take him to another dimension where he receives the golden castle and then can come back into his body to receive enlightenment. In other words, your desires that you earn the fulfillment of, can stand in the way because they're still attached to desires.
Right.
You know, it's looking at good and bad as aspects of existence, not saying, oh, I prefer good all the time over the bad.
Right.
So it is a type of acceptance that most people don't want to face. And when most people look at their life, they're looking for happy times.
Right.
And life is not really about that. So the meaningful life is the person who comes to the end of their life and has deep tragedy and ecstatic happiness. So what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
No, I was about to sneeze.
No, it's okay.
I was reading the Bhagavad Gita, and in the Bhagavad Gita they talk a lot about, like, I don't know, I guess sort of for me, like, I feel like such a young student on this path. Like, it feels very new to me to explore my life outside the goodies and to understand the joy of existence separate from the pleasures of the body. And, you know, like, that's all newer in the last 10 years of my life, definitely.
Well, I'll ask you a quick question
Yeah.
and then
Go back,
forward. Most people, if they think of what their favorite movie is, truly, not just favorite entertaining movie, but truly what they think is a good movie.
Yeah.
You know, does it have just everything happen good? The protagonist wakes up and they win the lottery and they, you know, their house smells like potpourri and their relationship's great and their kids, it's not even funny. I mean, someone has to trip over something for it to be funny.
Right.
It's that existence is bland.
Yes.
The thing that makes it anything is the juxtaposition with tripping down the stairs or the deep tragedy. The most meaningful movies to many people have this elation but also deep tragedy. It's important in meaning. The meaning of life has both of those things. So to have your life, if you view your life as a type of a movie, as a passage of happenings, those things are in there in a type of balance that make it robust and full. And that's what allows us to feel more completely and love more completely and love more deeply. So, you know, do you want the movie of your life to just everything to go right? It's very, you feel not alive. It's numbing.
Right. Yeah. No, I guess, I mean, it's interesting as you're talking and sort of my questions being answered, because it was just saying in the book that, like, you know, there are students that are students in earnest, but they never actually get to a place where they have no attachment or they never actually reach transcendence. And I guess given the nature of where I feel I am right now in my own journey, I'm sort of like, God, I don't know if I'm ever going to get there. And
But you have to understand from, depending on what school or philosophy you come from, one of the classical views of enlightenment is to become enlightened, one has to remove one's desire for enlightenment.
right.
And that's the hardest of all. You know, you come to the doorstep of enlightenment and you're tempted with all the powers, all the riches of the world. And then the very final thing is you have to renounce enlightenment itself. Because the desire for enlightenment keeps you from enlightenment. So the student in earnest is actually more directed in a way that is pure, who does not expect enlightenment,
Right.
accepts that it well may not happen. It's irrelevant.
Right.
To the true seeker, enlightenment is irrelevant.
Right.
It's one's journey, it's one's conduct within the journey, it's one's capacity for compassion and love that's important. Otherwise, those things are rendered counterfeit. They're rendered inauthentic when one's actual goal is enlightenment.
Right.
Why are you doing these things? Well, I want to be enlightened.
Right.
That's not it. That's even disrespectful to the journey itself.
Right.
That's disrespectful to life itself.
Right.
Is it not good enough? Is your journey not entertaining enough? So you must be looking for the goal of enlightenment?
Yeah. So interesting. Okay.
So,
So, I said,
Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Did you say what you wanted to say about the Bhagavad Gita?
yeah.
Okay.
I was just, I mean, yes, I had a confusion in there that you unconfused as you were talking.
Okay.
So.